Hello and welcome to Nancy Goodame, Space Ranger, Chapter 9. Now, the following chapter was planned as an audio play, but it's going to take a bit too much time, so it's something I'll have to revisit later. But in any case, the first half is a more serious, inverted commas, true part of the story, in that it explains a bit about what actually happened to Nancy, and then you'll hear a beep and it's back into Fantasyland. Okay, hen, a do, a tree, and away we go. Every story has a beginning and an end. The beginning of the story of Nancy Goodame began with the end of the story of Nancy McGinley, and a burst of static marked both of those things. It was a far distant type of static, 265 million kilometres distant. The static took 7 minutes to arrive, and when it did, it was met with panic. If you were watching the footage at the time, this is what you would have heard. Welcome back to our live coverage from Spaceport Europe in Guyana. We are moments away from getting news from San Laika 2 and from the first humans to set foot on Mars. Astronaut Nancy McGinley has been talking to the crew here in Guyana all morning, and the spacecraft is shortly about to begin the descent. The next voice you hear will be Nancy's. CT, have you the signal? Then you would have heard Roger, switching to audio. Then you'd have heard from Nancy herself, and she would have said, "Hello Earth, you're coming in through beautifully. Greetings from planet Mars. We have 100727, AOS 10413, beginning the descent. All systems nominal. The surface at Eber is as observed from orbit. Pitch trim is holding between 2 and 2.4. Looking good. We're picking up some high altitude plasma on the external." You wouldn't have heard the end of that sentence, because it would have been cut off by a burst of static. You'd have then heard a slew of terms like telemetry, negative, contact loss, San Laika 1, do you copy? Orbiter, San Laika 2, do you copy? Control, is there anything on the high gain antenna? Contact loss. Are we still on the public feed? Nancy, can you hear us? Then finally you'd have heard 060610, contact lost. I'm cutting the public feed. And that would have been it from European Spaceport. 2 lost spacecraft, 6 missing astronauts, billions of people watching, and no explanation of what had happened. Sometimes things are like that. Sometimes things do not fit a pattern. Sometimes they just do not make sense. It's normal. Just as it's normal to try put a shape on them. 4 weeks of investigation of the available information led the European Space Agency to state that an unforeseen property of the high-altitude plasma had interfered with the guidance systems on the spacecraft. The result had been catastrophic. A robot mission would be launched to find out more. But that did not put a shape on things for the McGinley family. And so, as things do, they fell apart. Not in a dramatic, loud-shouting, door-slamming, car-crashing sort of way. More in a quiet sleeping, more doing less, eating badly sort of way. The sort of way that can hollow out a soul. Or the souls of Ray McGinley and young Anthony McGinley and young Kate McGinley, till all was left was a mechanical, perfunctory sort of existence. An existence with a Nancy McGinley shaped hole in it. And for 6 months, that existence persisted. Until, for Anthony and Kate, it suddenly stopped. When Anthony found an unfinished book among his mother's things. He was supposed to be cleaning, but instead ended up reading and visiting outer space. A very particular outer space. One with Martians and Jupiterians and a Nancy McGinley, who was somehow both different to the mother Anthony had known and somehow also the same. And so, as Anthony read, this Nancy McGinley story began where the other Nancy McGinley story ended. Which meant Anthony was watching when a Martian astronaut named Martina Ruddlesplitch, a human astronaut named Mission Specialist Bart McMorrow, a Martian sheriff, and Nancy McGinley took a rocket ship to Jupiter. Well, saying Anthony was physically able to watch them is not exactly true, because Anthony's body remained 880 million kilometres away. But his mind was there, which is often the best part of a human. Bart, could you take a look out the window of the cargo bay to see if the awful dang Philondigators have been deployed? Asked Martina Ruddlesplitch. At that moment in time, she had opened the hatch between the control room and the habitation deck / living quarters below. leaned her head through it and spoken loudly enough for Bart to hear. "You gotta be joking me," was Bart's reply. Bart and Nancy were on the habitation deck below. Nancy was wondering how the rocket ship worked. Martina's request to Bart had brought her to a slightly closer understanding. Engineers are the same all over the solar system. First NASA, then the European Space Agency, and now the Martian Space Force. Why can't you people stop with the stupid names so the rest of us might have a clue what you're on about? Bart shook his head sadly, thought about getting up out of the habitation deck soft chair, thought the better of it, leaned back and said, "Why not just call it a braking system? Typical engineers. You're nothing but a bunch of nerds." "You're an engineer," reminded Nancy for the second time in their adventure. "Doesn't mean I have to act like an engineer," replied Bart. "Can one of you just check if the flamingators have been deployed?" asked Martina. "The sheriff will spend the rest of the adventure whinging if he has to climb down the stairs to the cargo bay." "No, he won't," replied Bart. "He dies in the next chapter. So worst case scenario, you only have to listen to his bitching and moaning until shortly after we land." "How could you know that?" asked Nancy. "How do you not know that?" asked Bart. "I thought this was your story." "Bart's right, Nancy. It is your story," agreed Martina. "But wish for a minute, will ye?" Martina stuck her head back through the hatch into the control room and placed both feet on the spiral staircase. She then backed down through the hatch, closed it behind her, climbed down the spiral staircase and joined Bart and Nancy on the habitation deck. She placed a finger over her lips and pointed upwards. "Look, I don't want the sheriff knowing he's going to die as soon as we land. It's not fair. And there's also a good chance he'll panic and do something to endanger us all." Martina turned to Bart and nodded. "So, as quiet as you can, tell me what happens." "Well, there's not a huge pile to tell. I mean, I'm human, so I don't have many of the words to describe what I saw, but, well, everything happened really quickly after the landing. I suppose within 30 seconds of touchdown, or whatever ye Martians use to measure time. Anyways, not a whole lot of it passed and the sheriff was dead, with his skull cracked open, his brain spilling out over the grass and his torso missing." "What do you mean his torso missing?" asked Martina. "Is there grass on Jupiter?" asked Nancy. "Gone. No longer there. Swallowed whole, Martina. And, sorry, yes, Nancy, there is grass on Jupiter." Grass? Like on Earth?" "Yes, Nancy, grass. What other kind of grass do you think? Lots of it, and shrubs, and a forest, and it was raining, well, drizzling. But everything was wet, so it must have made a good fall of rain just before we landed." "Are you sure it was Jupiter you were on?" "Of course. We went through Jupiterian passport control and everything." "Hang on, Bart. You said the sheriff died within 30 seconds of our touchdown. How did that leave enough time to go through passport control?" interrupted Martina. She pointed to the ceiling high above her and placed a finger over her lips for a second time. "And answer quietly. The roof is tantalum tungsten alloy. Great for space travel, but rubbish at keeping out noise." "Passport control on Jupiter is pretty crap," whispered Bart. "It was just a fella in a wooden shed, and he ran away terrified as soon as he saw the glimp." "There are glimps on Jupiter!" The shock of that knowledge had caused Martina to forget being silent and shout the sentence loudly enough to prompt the sheriff to open the hatch to the control room and begin a wobbly descent down the stairs to the habitation deck, and talk as he wobbled. "What's this about glimps on Jupiter? What are you talking about?" he asked. "Not me, I hope. Actually, no, I hope it's me. I meant, of course it's me. I'm important. What are you saying about me?" "Nothing," said Martina quickly. "We were just reminiscing." Martina nodded at Bart and Nancy as she spoke. It was a sort of, "Come on and join in with this bit of spoofing, please," sort of nod. Bart tried to oblige. "Yeah, we were reminiscing about the time earlier." "What time earlier?" asked the sheriff. "Oh, just before you opened the hatch to come down to us." "Right now?" "Yes, Sheriff, it was a very recent reminisce. We just wanted to do it quickly so it was fresh in our memories." "Oh, I see," said the sheriff. "Mind if I join in?" "Well, that would be hard as you weren't there at the time," said Martina. "Yeah," said Nancy. Her comment wasn't much of a help to the impromptu smokescreen Bart had tried to create, but Nancy was feeling guilty for not helping and decided that when it comes to building a lie, every little helps. "Well, that's a pity," said the sheriff. "I'm fond of a reminisce. Always have been. Ever since I was old enough to go and watch the Jupiterian bulk harvesters loading their annual cargoes. I dreamt of joining one of those crews. I would have done so too, only law enforcement called me. You know, the job of sheriff is a tough one. It can be very challenging. Luckily, I'm well up to the challenge. And you know, it's a job worth doing. Nancy, Martina and Bart looked away from the sheriff when he stepped from the winding staircase and onto the floor of the habitation deck. Nancy pretended to be examining her crossbow. Bart stared at his feet, and Martina glanced furtively up to the control room. "We better figure something quickly. There can't be more than 9 Dipples before we touch down on Jupiter," she said. "Of course, that was before the rise of Sosman Borkstapel. He put a stop to any Martian's dream of space exploration. You know, I haven't spoken to a Jupiterian since Sosman came to power on their planet. Guess that's about to change." Bart coughed and looked to Martina. "You need to tell the sheriff. It's what he would have wanted. I mean, it's what he wants. Before he dies. Especially in such a gruesome way. Just so his last words aren't some pining for days of yore guff." "Oh, what's this about last words?" asked the sheriff. "You are going to be eaten by a glimp the dipple we step onto Jupiterian soil," said Martina. The sheriff tried to reply with words, but managed instead. Martina turned to Bart. "Tell us exactly what is going to happen." "Well," said Bart, "the landing is going to go smoothly, and we're going to set down close to a wooden shed in a large grass field surrounded by forestry, which was a smooth move, as it's the quietest, remotest, most neglected spaceport on planet Jupiter. And it'd have taken days for Sosman Borkstapel to have gotten wind of our arrival. Anyways, we all get out and go into passport control, which was in the shed, but as soon as we get within 5 feet of the place, the lone immigration official pegs it out of the place, yelling, 'Glimp!' and makes for the forestry. At that same time, the sheriff is eviscerated from behind by a claw-headed creature. And, well, I didn't get past that bit." Nancy, Bart, Martina and the sheriff fell silent and stayed silent until Martina said, "There must be something we can do to stop that happening." "Well, there is something we could not do to stop that happening," replied Nancy. "We could not land on the planet," suggested Bart. "Yes, or at least not land on a part of the planet with a hungry glimp on it." Martina shook her head. No. We can't just rock up to one of the busier spaceports. Sosman would have his Sosniaks after us in no time." Bart then clicked his fingers excitedly. "I have it! We just delay the landing. That immigration lad was screaming like a banshee and pegging it for the woods. The glimp's sure to follow." "Perfect," said Martina. "I'll partially retract the Offaldang Philondicators." Nancy, Bart and the sheriff did not respond. "To reduce the velocitational triangular threshold," she added. Nancy, Bart and the sheriff did not respond for a second time. "To increase the upstang feedback." Nancy, Bart and the sheriff did not respond for a third time. "To make us late." "Great," said Nancy. "Ah, good thinking," said Bart. "Am I still going to die?" wondered the sheriff. "Because it'd be a shame for everyone if I did. And the likes of me and my skills will never be again. If I died," he added. "No," said Martina, "but I don't fancy the chances of that Jupiterian official." "Ah, you didn't see the speed of him," said Bart. "That glimp will have his work cut out catching him." "Good, I suppose," replied Martina, who then climbed back up the winding staircase into the control room to set in motion the sequence required to partially retract the Offaldang Philondicators, which was for the best, as she was the only one on board who knew what that sequence was. And so it was for late afternoon on the first day of the first human outpost on Mars. 1 missing mission commander, 2 missing European Space Agency spacecraft, 3 crew from a missing ESA spacecraft, the planet Jupiter, a hungry glimp, a terrified Jupiterian immigration official, Nancy McGinley, Bart McMurrow, Martina Ruddlesplitch, a Martian sheriff, and a slightly delayed Martian rocket. Okay, thank you, listener, for sticking with that. Fair play to you. There'll be more next week, and sure, it can only get better.